This is TLV1.
TLV1 radio.
Great mixture.
I like television.
This is still V1.
This is
Tel Aviv is a beautiful city.
Great city, great radio.
TLV1.
This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review with Gilad Halpern.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to the word, to thought and to debate. I'm your host Gilad Halpern, and every week I'll be engaging in close encounters of the intellectual kind with writers, scholars, documentary filmmakers and other people of all fields and vocations who have made our lives a tad more interesting. Our first guest today will be Dr. Ido Zelkovitz. He is a Middle East scholar at the University of Haifa, specializing in Palestinian political history. He'll talk to us about his new book, Students and Resistance in Palestine, Books, Guns and Politics, which explores the Palestinian student movement from a historical as well as a sociological perspective. Our second guest will be Dr. Neta Lipman. She's the Deputy Director of the Israeli Society of Ecology and Environmental Sciences. She will tell us about environmental justice. Is the green cause inextricably linked to social justice? And if so, how does it play out in America and in Israel? This is our show today. Do stay with us. We'll be back right after this musical break.
From up above I heard the angels sing to me these words. And sometimes in your eyes I see the beauty in the world. Oh, now I'm floating so high, I blossom and die. Sends your storm and your lightning to strike me between the eyes. Sometimes the stars decide to reflect in puddles in the dirt. When I look in your eyes, I forget all about what hurts. Oh, now I'm floating so high, I blossom and die. Sends your storm and your lightning to
You're listening to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. I am Gilad Halpern. Welcome back. I'm now joined here in the studio by Dr. Ido Zelkovitz. He is a Middle East scholar at the University of Haifa, specializing in Palestinian political history. He is the author of the book Students and Resistance in Palestine, Books, Guns and Politics, that was recently published in English by Routledge. It explores the Palestinian student movement from a historical and sociological perspective. Hi, Ido, and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hi, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So let's talk about student movements in general. They've always been associated with political causes, especially progressive ones, not to mention revolutionary ones. And we can talk about Berkeley and Paris of '68 and numerous places in the former communist bloc. So how does the Palestinian case, the Palestinian student movement, fit into all this?
And what is the Palestinian student movement? I think maybe we have students' movements. I mean, by and large, the Palestinians by character are different from the big student movements that we had in Berkeley or in the West. I mean, they belong to another, I would say, cultural dimension. By and large, the Palestinian society is far way more conservative, more traditional. And we should also remember that the Palestinian universities have been established only in the 70s after Israel occupied the West Bank in 1967. So we have a lot of differences between the Palestinian student movement and student revolution all around the world.
Including the Arab world? How does it in relation to other student movements in the Arab world, because, like we said, it's not exactly Western phenomenon. We were talking about Europe and America, but also about the former communist bloc. What is the situation in the Arab world, and maybe from there we can go down to the Palestinian case.
Historically, we saw students playing major role in revolution through the 20s, or even before, in the beginning of the 20th century in Iran, then in the 20th in Egypt. But we must remember that back then, if the students in the Arab world played a role in the attempts to retrieve independence against occupied or foreign forces, over here in the Palestinian case, well, the Palestinians until today still don't have a state. So I think that in this sense we can say that the Palestinian students after 1948 had a major role in creating and reshaping, or maybe reinventing or imagining the Palestinian identity after the loss of war in 1948.
But where was their center? The Palestinians, we all know, during the war of 1948, that we call the War of Independence and they call the Nakba, were scattered all over the Middle East and perhaps other places as well. Many of them have been to this day in refugee camps all around the Middle East. Where, I mean, a movement, any kind of movement, needs to have some sort of structure, some sort of hierarchy. How does it play out in the Palestinian case, where they really don't have a center?
Because the Palestinian people actually didn't have its center. So if I have to point out about the most important place, I would say that Cairo was the place that it all began. I mean, after 1948, students in the Arab world, Palestinian students, start to gather one to each other, and they started to discuss their unique situation. They lived in the diaspora.
Would you say that the Palestinian students in Cairo were the first Palestinian intellectuals?
I would say that was the most important center back then. We had, I would say, couple of places that we saw student activity started to be more organized with a national character, but by and large, Cairo because of the pan-Arabic spirit of Jamal Abdel Nasser, and because of maybe Cairo back then was also symbol of modernity, attracted a lot of Palestinian students.
Including Yasser Arafat.
And yes, and Yasser Arafat back then, 18 years old in 1948, and in 1952, actually, he have been elected to be the chairman of the Palestinian Student Association in Cairo, and he started from there to build the infrastructure that will serve him later on for a broader, wider nationalist activity.
Can you elaborate on that? Was Arafat's years in Cairo as a student his formative years as the standard bearer of the Palestinian cause later on?
In 1952, actually, Arafat elected to be the chairman, like I said, of the local Palestinian Student Association. Until this moment, this small, very small association was controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. And actually, Yasser Arafat don't tell him, but he was one of them. In 1952, he came with a new idea. He said it's a new area for us, and we must adopt a new identity in order to create new answer. Let's leave aside the supranationalist ideas and identities, and let's adopt the Palestinian national idea as a main theme. He came with this discourse to his fellows from the Muslim Brotherhood, the Palestinians who were members of the Muslim Brotherhood, and because he was very charismatic, they followed him. His list in the 1952 election actually was composed from 9 different people. 7 of them were members of the Muslim Brotherhood, 1 communist, and 1 I don't know from where he brought him.
So a communist was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Because when they left the supra-identity issue aside and they started to focus about the problems that Palestinian students have, they found the mutual. They found the best that they can agree upon and create something new.
Oh, that's amazing. That perhaps belonging to the Muslim Brotherhood at the time was the only way to express yourself politically. Is that what it means in practice?
The Muslim Brotherhood on the one hand, and on the other maybe the Communist Party, because when you are a minority and you are using supranational identity as a political tool, you can bridge over the divide with different minor groups and feel that you belong to something wider.
Okay.
Now, by the way, from this small student association that Arafat took control over it in 1952, later on, in 1959, a new movement have been created. I mean, this small association was maybe the soil that the Fatah movement later on in 1959.
So it also started as a student movement.
Yeah.
So Fatah essentially, initially it was a student movement.
And they targeted the youth as their main audience.
Okay, so with the formation of Fatah and later, a few years later, the PLO, the Palestinians have become more institutionalized and organized. Where was the place of the Palestinian movement in that structure? And I would like you to focus especially on Arafat and his relationship, the relationship of his mechanism to the student body.
The PLO, well, it's another story. It's a different story, because actually the PLO was supposed to be the answer of Jamal Abdel Nasser and the Arab states, or maybe the Arab League, or the institutionalized politics to the spirit of youth. They were afraid from this spirit of youth that had a sense of revolution, and they wanted to contain it. Now, in 1959, when Fatah was established, on the other end, we saw a new Palestinian student body next to her. I'm talking now about the General Union of Palestinian Students that have been created from Arafat Association, and suddenly, for the first time in 1959, we saw a functioning national body on a wider level. This body actually contained different and small student associations from all around the Arab world, And on the next stage, suddenly we saw also new association of Palestinian students in Germany, in France, in the United States, that have been
Starting
established.
from the 50s?
Yeah, the beginning of the 60s. And in the beginning of the 60s, they became part of this. They became part of this association. They became under the umbrella of the General Union of Palestinian Students. And actually, Fatah used this body in order to recruit more and more young Palestinian students into its ranks.
As advocates or as active members?
Both, and I would say also as military members, as a gunmen.
Right. But would you say that when it comes to decision-making per se, can you identify some sort of major political or foreign policy decision that was made following perhaps pressure, bottom-up pressure from student ranks?
Yeah, in 1962, in its third general conference, the student leadership called publicly for the establishment of a new Palestinian national body. And they say we are now maybe the most important national representative of this chaos, but we are a sectorial movement. We are representing only certain, or not one voice, but certain voices inside the Palestinian society, and we need to establish something wider,
like an umbrella,
bigger,
organization.
like an umbrella that can organize different voices and different sectors of society under its leadership. And the PLO that have been established in 1964 as a decision that have been taken by the Arab League was the answer for this youth awakening.
And then basically only after that the PLO has taken over Palestinian politics and became the representative of the Palestinian cause in the world?
Yes, actually after 1969, when this generation of Palestinian youngsters grow up a little bit, maybe say, become more mature, and took the PLO from within. Because between 1964 to 1967, we had this fight or struggle between generation. The generation that established the PLO and actually established it from the top down, he saw in the Youth Awakening as sort of a threat for the Palestinian...
I'd like to ask you about that also, taking perhaps a more bird's eye view of the whole evolution of the Palestinian cause and the student movement within it over the years. The Palestinian struggle has meandered a lot and, overall moderated because, right now the Palestinian national movement, at least the main representatives are willing to recognize Israel, negotiate with Israel, are talking about, a two-state solution, etc., which no, it's been going on for a while, but at the time was a major development. Would you say that the student movement had a moderating effect on the Palestinian national cause, or vice versa? Were they pushing it to the extreme?
Well, great question. It depends on the period, the place, and the political circumstances.
You're such an academic. It's such an academic answer. It depends on everything, so I can't give you a straightforward answer.
I would say that actually back then, in the end of the 50s, in the beginning of the 60s, the student movement called for the establishment of the armed struggle together with Fatah. So they were very radical there, and they wanted to radicalize the society, because they saw the armed struggle as part of the Palestinian national identity. Later on, in the 90s, we see that academics that grow up inside the universities jumped into the political arena, and they were the negotiators with Israel.
Right. Okay.
So it's different generation. We see change.
And right now, with the expansion, with the growth of BDS in the world and in Palestine, anti-normalization campaigns, etc. to what extent do students play a role in stoking and kindling these sentiments and these these causes?
One, philosophically, I mean, students have this great advantage. I mean, do you remember the time in the university? It's great time. It's a safe place. We have safe space to develop new thoughts, new ideas. When the students are sitting in classes or maybe in the cafeteria is the high school for new thoughts and for revolutions, not the classes themselves. They don't feel the political circumstances around them. They don't have the same problems that they have at home. They don't feel the pressure of the occupation. They don't feel under siege. They are like living in another dimension. When they are coming out of the campus, especially in the West Bank, back to the public space, back to their city, to their villages, then something is changing. By far, I would say that the young generation today, which basically also live without to know their neighbors on the countryside, are more radicalized than the generation that grew up in the end of the 80s and in the 90s. The BDS movement have a lot of support among them. The universities and the campuses are a strong base for this idea. But if I have to compare it to the 90s, I still see some hopes, because I, myself, took part in mutual meetings, people-to-people program with the Palestinian students or colleagues, and there is a will, I mean, I do believe so, to develop a dialogue. So the BDS, well, it's as an idea, it's very strong among them, but it's just another tool that they are using in order to try to put pressure on Israel.
So what you're saying is that they are warming to it as an abstract concept, but it just doesn't stand up to their reality in the West Bank, and therefore they have this ambivalence about anti-normalization and dialogue at the same time.
Yes, they're calling for boycott, sanction, and all of the things, but they are, on the other hand, are very, very open and ready for dialogue. By the way, I do believe that Palestinians, and this is something very important for us to understand also from historical point of view, Palestinians in the West Bank are far away, I would say, more moderate in their approach to Israel and dialogue with Israel from their counterparts, brothers and sisters abroad, because they don't have another choice but talking with us. We are here, over there in the free world, under the slogans of this beautiful values, freedom of speech.
Sure, you can have principles without accountability.
Yes, it's more easy. It's more easy when you don't feel the pressure.
Absolutely. All right, Dr. Ido Zelkovitz, I'm afraid this is all we have time for. You're a Middle East scholar at the University of Haifa, specialized in Palestinian political history. You are the author of the new book, Students and Resistance in Palestine, Books, Guns and Politics. It was recently published in English by Routledge. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
يا طير الطاير يا رايح عالديرين تحميك عيوني وتصونك عين الله والله يا مسافر شعلاني هالغيرين فلسطين بلادي حلوية ما شاء الله ميل عالصفر حول عالطبري لا عكا وحيفا سلم عبحرها ولا تنسى الناصري هالقلعة العربية بشر بسالي برجعة أهلها أنا يا قدس والدمعات هاموا الأهلي في هنفتخر فينا التاريخ افتخر فينا التاريخ وحنامه كتر ما صبر شعبي على العذاب ومرق عغزي بوسني رامي الهام أهلنا شامة ورجالة جبارة والقدس العاصمة والأقصى عالمها إن شاء الله يا ربي تجمعنا بديارة يا طير الطاير يا رايح عالديري تحميك عيوني وتصونك عين الله والله يا مسافر شعلاني هالغيري نسطين بلادي حلوة يا ما شاء.
You're listening to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. I am Gilad Halpern. Welcome back. I am now joined here in the studio by Dr. Neta Lipman. She is the Deputy Director of the Israeli Society of Ecology and Environmental Sciences. She's here to discuss one of the main areas of her expertise, which is environmental justice and the evolution of the environmental justice discourse in Israel. Hi, Neta, and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hi, Gilad. Thank you for having me here.
So let's talk first and foremost about the term environmental justice. Has environmentalism always been associated with progressive causes? When did the actual term environmental justice become a cohesive concept?
Well, when referring to environmental theory, one usually divided into three waves. Like the first one is looking at the romantic wave of how people look at the environment and how they love to go out hunting and trekking and look at the beauty of our world. And this was like the first stage of thinking about the environment. The second one was more focusing about the human being welfare, about how we polluting the air, how we're polluting our water, how we're polluting our food. And then people started to look at the environment otherwise. And the third wave of how people look at the environment is more social one, saying everyone get hurt by polluting factories or by the dead fish or by terrible food that we eat. But most people
but some people are more affected than others.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. And when did this realization come into force? Well, at what point in history?
Well, there wasn't like a single case. There were several of cases, but the most famous one, which I investigated in my PhD, was the famous story in the Love Canal in the U.S., starting in the mid-'70s up in upstate New York, where in a very quiet and nice neighborhood called the Love Canal, people...
It sounds pretty quiet. And
yeah,
nice, yeah.
And lovely.
Yeah.
People started to, mostly women, started to understand that something wrong with the neighborhood. Like they're starting to see sparkling stones that kids used to play with it, and it causes burns in their hands and pants, and there was a terrible smell coming out of their houses, mostly from the basements. And one woman, a housewife called Louise Gibbs, started to investigate it by her own, and she realized that in the early 50s, where her house is located now, used to be a dump of waste of chemical. Over 21,000 tons of dangerous chemicals are buried under her home and under this neighborhood.
The chemicals were still there when the houses were built.
Yeah.
It's not like residues or leftovers that were taken away to allow for the construction of that neighborhood. They actually covered it with soil and built a whole neighborhood.
Exactly. There was a big factory, factory, which, you can relate the hooker and the love, and you get a complicated situation here. But the real complication is having a lot of kids ill and a lot of diseases in this specific neighborhood. And And those people
And
started...
in real time, in the 50s, did nobody see a problem with constructing a neighborhood atop
Well, it was like a donation of the factory. They gave for what can be called the worst philanthropic deal ever made. They gave this landscape to the Love Canal school committee over the incredible amount of $1 back in 52. And no one told those families, the new families that came to build their house there, that something is wrong with the soil their house is built on. So 900 families established their life there and started to understand something is wrong. As I said, a young woman, Louise Gibbs, a housewife, started to ask around and understanding that there is a bigger problem here. It's not just like the water is dirty or the soil is... Those problems are causing dramatic...
But mainly the fact that this issue wasn't at all addressed by the authorities. That's the main problem, right? And that's what makes it into some sort of social cause.
Exactly. And not only the one that dealt with those problems was the hardcore, the old school of environmental organization, but now they opened a new frontier of blue column people that saying we are the people that got hurt by this factory. And mind you, most of the people living in this neighborhood are occupied in those chemical factories all around the area. So in a way, they were fighting their boss and when cutting the branch they are sitting on, and but they're starting a really huge campaign against the hooker factory and saying that we are the people that got hurt most. And there is a label and a name under or behind people.
And what was the bottom line? Did they get compensated or relocated? What was the...
Both. But, go and compensate a family that lost or...
Sure. No, but my question is, did it create some sort of precedent that as of this point, environmental issues are seen differently in the United States?
Exactly. From this point, in 82, the president offered to evacuate all families and give them money as a consolation. And afterwards, like 10 years later, and they started legislation of the Superfund and basically the Environmental Justice Act that started in Clinton's administration, saying that every act of the government should refer in the implication it causes.
Okay, so now let's take it home to Israel. Was there a similar turning point or this momentous event that set in motion a similar thing? There is some sort of, you're part of that environmental civil society. What was the trigger in Israel's case?
So that exactly was the motivation of my research, because I said, well, great, environmental justice in the US and in Europe basically focused on two major issues. One is public transportation. Look, like, where do you put your money? Do you put it on roads or do you put it on public transportation that everyone can use it? Once again, it talks not only about would you take the landscape and turn it into cement, which is the hardcore thinking about the environment, but also like think about who you're gonna help if you're gonna...
A more equitable distribution of the resources.
So this is one, transportation, and the other one is how does factories, chemical factories and polluting factories. And I said, well, perfect, because I have two perfect case studies in Israel. I have the Road 6,
the Trans-Israel Highway.
Exactly. And I have Chemistral factory in the city of Akko. Both cases were major campaigns of the environmental movement in Israel. And now let's dig into it and let's see if they succeeded in putting not only the discourse or the campaign focused only on environmental hardcore issues like polluting air and polluting soil and water, but would they put another term in it and put the people in it, and you know.
I don't know about that chemical plant in Acre, but I remember the campaign against Highway Number 6, which was supposed to. It was paved eventually. It now cuts Israel from the southern periphery to the northern periphery, and actually the socialist argument was brought forward by the government, saying this will help people from the periphery come to the center where all the jobs are, etc., a lot more easily thanks to Highway Number 6. So wouldn't you say that this progressive cause was co-opted actually by the government?
You can say it because you're a male and you have a car and you have a license and you have the money to pay for the toll. Like if you were a woman or a young boy or an old man, and if you don't have the money to, if you're young enough to have a license or you don't have the money to have a car, or to, you know. So you see, in one sentence, I put a lot of people out of the group that can use this road. Rather, if you put it, I don't know, railroads or other public transportation, everyone can use it.
And the people who campaigned against it, did they use all that as part of the rhetoric, as part of the campaign?
Very little and very late. Most of the campaign was, you know, when I was... Well, never mind how old I was, but back in '85, before the army, I went to the SPNI, the Society of Protecting Nature in Israel, and like a volunteer, and this was like the first ever. We started a campaign against the road, and I, hugged a tractor and put a cable over my body back there, and still have burns here in my foot. But nevertheless, the SPNI and all the other environmental organization mostly said, don't build this road, it's gonna harm the wildlife, it's gonna it's gonna affect the aquifer, and it's gonna affect, and talking with all kind of words that people, say, okay, you're tree huggers, you all of a sudden you're gonna promote the Meatless Monday, and we're all gonna go back to the caves and
so what you're saying
trees.
is that they didn't manage to translate it into some sort of daily or layperson's language that could relate to everybody across the board.
Exactly, it was a niche.
So what you're saying is that if you go back to the typology that you enumerated earlier about the three phases of environmental struggles in Israel, even to as late as these two campaigns, and we're talking about 10 and 15 years ago, they still remained in the first and second stage, that is the romantic stage of don't touch our pristine environment, and the second stage of pollution is bad.
Yeah. And water are getting hurt, and animals are getting hurt. But, so now you're talking to, I don't know, 2,000 people, the most. But if you're going to say, this going to cost you this and that, and it's going to be, instead of putting public transportation, or instead of investigating this money in welfare or in education or whatever. So now you have a different discourse, and now a lot of people can relate into it. One example can be the struggle that just ended a couple of weeks ago in the Palmachim beach, because you can see in this struggle.
So tell us a bit about it.
In Palmachim beach, just like a couple of kilometers south to Tel Aviv, a single contractor got a permission to build a special resort on this beautiful beach that I, as a kid, used to go there every Saturday with my family, and I wanted to take my kids there. And all of a sudden, one sunny day, you find fence all around it saying you cannot enter this area because it's private now. 8 years ago, started a campaign against it. from local people, and then it became a huge wave, which ended in a success when the government took back the contract from the constructor.
And the campaigners, did they engage the public by saying, every single one of you will be affected by this?
Exactly, and they didn't say, there are turtles there, they can be hurt, and they're so sweet, the turtles, and maybe water can go inside the land, because no, they said, you know what, you remember the beautiful Saturdays you want to take your kids to the beach, the open, the last frontier that we can go to, so forget about it, you cannot go anymore because a private constructor took the freedom, took your freedom to do this.
So what you're saying is that the discourse around the question of environmental justice has evolved in a very significant way in Israel. My question is it a sufficiently significant way?
I want to say that if you approach a lot of people, like in the protest in 2011, when
the cost of living protests. Yeah.
Exactly, and when it took out thousands of people out of the street because it touches everyone, and I've been around in campaigns and in demonstration for 20 years now, and the most we can take out is 2,000 people most, and all of a sudden 500,000 people out in the street because it touches them, and this is what the story in the Love Canal succeeded in, because it remained a wave all through nationwide. All the United States, it came in the TV, in BBC made a special episode in 60 Minutes about it. Everyone talked about the way environmental issues affects special people, and it affects all of us.
Mm-hmm. And do you see a scope for it in Israel? This is obviously something that you at the Israeli Society of Ecology and Environmental Sciences are attempting to do, but do you see any progress?
Well, what I can see is a lot of scientists and academy people that we meet doing our work in environmental society is that they do care. They want their science to be heard. They want the science to be affecting people, and not just, I'm counting the dots on this bug, and I can tell you when the bug is out from his shell and when it's not. Mm-hmm. No, but I can tell you that if you put a polluted air around it, it won't go out, so then it can affect your disease or your food or your medicine, and this narrowing the gap between the science and the daily effect on us, it's a major thing that should be done. And
but is it done? That is my question, because if we go back to the 2011 cost of living protests, it didn't really create this revolution that everybody was talking about. Things pretty much remained the same. We have the same prime minister and the same economic policy by and large. But people say that at the end of the day, one of the side effects, the positive side effects, were that the lay Israeli is a lot more aware of questions of transparency and government accountability and stuff like that. Is it similar when it comes to the environment?
Well, I think it have evolved, it have changed, and when once again this Love Canal story happened in the 70s, pretty much when I was born, and it took more than 30 years to come here, and people that can understand the relationship between it, and to gather a big crowd around those issues. But still, I'm not sure that we're doing enough. I think that still when you talk about environmental tragedies, you only think about the bugs and maybe the water. You don't think about this as a holistic problem. Take the fuel tragedy that happened 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago in the south. In the south,
the oil leak.
Oil leak in Ivrona. mostly what people were talking about is, how the deer were affected and how terrible it looks like, like we were in Kuwait in the 90s and you saw cormorant all covered in oil. This is a terrible thing to the ecosystem. Surely. And, I would like to come and hug this deer and clean it. But it have a larger effect on, if you kill this environment, the ecosystem cannot survive and it can affect, the bugs later that are going to your flowers. And then, all this ecosystem, which is very delicate to begin with, can be affected. And at the end of the day, it will affect your food, it will affect your medicine, it will affect,
I have to say that my impression after this disaster, and we're talking about a few weeks ago, that this message didn't really transpire in the media. It's all your fault then. All right. Enough finger-pointing. Dr. Neta Lipman, Deputy Director of the Israeli Society of Ecology and Environmental Sciences. Thank you so much about coming in and telling us about environmental justice. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
hunter on the western plain. Dream the fisherman in his boat. Dream the logger in the great northwest. Dream the farmer in the old heartland.
That was the Tel Aviv Review for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Also, big thanks to our technical producers, Adam Scher and Leo Peleg. Do join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. Until then, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and on Twitter, and do write in your comments and suggestions to gilad@tlv1.fm. Until next week, goodbye.
A teenage heart is an unguided thought. We're trying hard to make something of what we are. I am trapped between the main blanket and new sheet. We'll never amount to anything. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Be just like me. Come on, come on, come on. Be a nobody. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Be just like me. Come on, come on, come on. Be a nobody. You ring about to show you're bleeding. I watched, I saw your mind fall out of your head. Weekends and cheap thrills, risk it all for an inch of fun. We'll never amount to anything. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Be just like me. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Be a nobody. Come on, come on, come on, come on. slow.